So welcome everybody to tonight's session. Now, look, regardless of whatever retirement means to me or you, one thing is very much for certain. No one wants to spend their later years stressing about money and their financial situation. So tonight's presentation will cover how much you'll need in retirement, ways of funding your retirement, strategies to increase your superannuation balance, managing risk and protecting your superannuation, and of course, strategies to retire in style. The presentation has been designed for people who are really 10 years out from retirement, but really who want to get organised quite early. But saying that, everyone will really benefit from this presentation, irrespective of age. And presenting today is Melissa Healy. She is the Director of Wealth Management at DFK Everalls in Canberra, and of course, a very valued corporate partner of our ACT chapter here at the Institute, and it's great to have her with us. This session is being recorded, so if you miss any parts of it, don't worry. What we will do, once we get the link, we'll pop it onto YouTube, and next week we'll send you the link so you can watch it again as well or share it with others. Now, don't forget that at the end of the session, we'll open up for questions. So if you do have any questions that you want me to ask Melissa, the chat box down below is your friend. You'll see that chat box down there. Just pop into that chat box and do feel free to pop your questions in there. And at the end of Melissa's presentation, I'll go through those questions with her as well. So joining me now, Melissa Healy from DFK Everalls. Welcome to our session. Absolutely fantastic to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Michael. Really appreciated. And welcome everybody. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you today. We're going to have some fun, hopefully. So yeah, that's me. What I need to start with is the usual fine print disclaimer. This information is based on, legal tax information that's current at the moment, but of course the government keeps changing the rules all the time. But please note, this is all about the facts and food for thought. It is not advice, and because it doesn't take into account your personal circumstances. So one way I like to talk about it is that, I'm talking about things that you can do and sometimes what you can't do, but I'm certainly not talking about what you should do yourself because I don't know what your circumstances are. So please bear that in mind. This is just to give you some food for thought that you can then go and do your own research, or better still, go and talk to a professional financial advisor. So today, as Michael said, we're going to focus on sort of 3 steps. It's the old, start with the end in mind. How much are you going to actually need to fund your retirement? Then we look at, well, where are you now? And therefore the difference, we need strategies to fill in that gap. So let's have a look. But before we dive into that though, I just want to answer a question that comes up very frequently, is this one about when can I retire? The short answer is you can retire as soon as you can fund your living expenses without working. Now, that might mean funding them from superannuation or investments outside of superannuation. So, we often talk to clients about a gap year where perhaps they want to retire at 55, but as you can see, you can't access your superannuation until age 60. So maybe we, do the financial planning such that you've got your superannuation that you can access from age 60, but we have some money saved outside of superannuation that you can live on for, say, the 5 years before you get to retirement. Your superannuation you can't access until age 60. And the other thing is that now that's different to the government's Centrelink age pension. That one you're not allowed to start until you're age 67, and even then it's subject to income and assets tests. So it just gives you that those boundaries of what you can do and when you can access things. So that might shed some light for some of you. So in terms of how much do I need? Well, of course, it depends on what is your desired lifestyle in retirement. How long does your money need to last for? So obviously there's a big difference between retiring at 55, 65 or 75, with life expectancies, which again might vary depending on your family genetics. But either way, you might need to budget on perhaps 30 to 40 years. So, that's an awfully long time. So, saving for your retirement does need to be taken seriously. And of course, the other thing that comes into it is how much capital do you want to preserve for your family? So, we have some clients that are operating on the ski principle, spend the kids' inheritance. So, they work out how much money they've got, divide by however many years, and that's what they're, drawing down, such that effectively, if they time it right, there's nothing left at the end, kind of thing, except perhaps the home, which will then, be the kids' inheritance. So again, how much of that capital do you want to preserve for your family? To also give you some guidance, there's research that's been done that sort of says most people will be looking to receive a retirement income equal to about 62% of your final salary. So if you're earning 100 grand now, you only need an annual salary in retirement of 62.5 grand. Now that's because it's going to be tax free if it's in superannuation, so no tax needs to come out of your 100 grand salary, if you like. It's also assuming that your house is already paid off, so you don't have to pay mortgage repayments. Hopefully your kids are already grown up and independent, so you don't have to look after them anymore. And of course, if you're not working, then you don't have any work-related expenses like driving to and from work and coffee and lunch and clothes and all that kind of stuff. So life is supposed to get a bit cheaper in retirement, but of course it also depends on what you want to do in retirement, and how expensive, for example, your hobbies are going to be, or how much travel you're going to do. And then the last factor there about how you're going to protect and grow your super, because of course it's not just a matter of how much you save and put into superannuation, it's making sure that that superannuation is working effectively for you. I like to say working as hard for you as you did to earn it in the first place to be able to put it in the super fund. So, those are the kinds of considerations that you have to take into account there. Some other food for thought is this graph from MLC. Basically, it's just showing you that there are 3 phases of retirement. The first phase is, where you've just retired, you're fit, you're active, you're going off traveling, you're doing hobbies and all that kind of stuff, and therefore your spending in retirement will be relatively high. But then as life progresses, maybe you start slowing down a little bit, perhaps not so active, maybe just doing Aussie holidays instead of overseas holidays, that kind of thing. You've finished renovating the house, you don't need a new car, or maybe you've stopped driving, that kind of thing. So your expenses actually start to bottom out a little bit. Then the problem is that your expenses pick up again, because as you need more and more help and or medical expenses and care, your expenses are going to, living expenses are going to go up again. So we just have to be able to bear that in mind when we're looking at how much money we need, and I guess how much money we pull out of our superannuation fund. So, we might pull more out to start with and then take less and then take more, but over time it'll average out such that you've still got money to live on. This is another interesting graph from MLC. This is looking at life expectancies and what percentage of your life will be active. So it feeds into that earlier slide. According to MLC and the Australian Bureau of Statistics, 75% of your retirement is actually going to be healthy and reasonably active. So, that's great news in terms of you're going to be able to enjoy a significant part of your retirement, but it also means, again, you have to be really careful to manage your money so that you can afford to do the things you want to do during that time period. Now, that line shows you the life expectancy. So 74.3% of people are expected to live to about 83. 50% of people will go on to live to 89. 25% of people will apparently make it to 93, and 5% will make it to 100. So again, look at your family genetics to see and past lifestyle for yourself to work out which category you might be in, and that'll give you that indication of how long your money might need to last you for. And so the blocks just show then that most people have at least that 9.5 years free of any issues, so they're relatively healthy and active. The next 6.5 years, you're slowing down a little bit, but you're still out there and doing things. And, it's certainly not until, your 80s that you're going to be really slowing down. So it's an interesting graph to bear in mind. So in terms of how much do you actually need to live on, I find the easiest thing is to sort of break it up into 4 categories. So the first one is obviously your reasonable living expenses. So hopefully you are debt-free and own your own home. But, it's obviously your groceries, your car expenses, rates and stuff on the house, paying for hobbies, depending on how expensive they are. But, those reasonable living day-to-day expenses fit into that first category. Then your second category then is your extra lifestyle income. So actually the better way of thinking about it is your reasonable living expenses is the amount of money you need to live on. The extra lifestyle income is the money that you want to live on. So, it's not critical, but gee, it's handy. So those extra lifestyle expenses can include travel, they can include funding your hobbies. Outsourcing means outsourcing things like cleaning, repairs and maintenance around the house, perhaps taxis if you can't drive anymore, that kind of thing. Then we've got one-off spending. So a lot of people who retire have some one-off spending items in mind. So perhaps there is that Mediterranean cruise, that was on the previous graph. But some sort of, once in a lifetime kind of post-retirement holiday. Maybe now that you've got time and energy, some house renovations are in order. Maybe it's time to buy a new car, the last car in retirement kind of thing. And or maybe there's some toys like boats or caravans, maybe you want to go grain nomading, that kind of thing. So there's going to be some one-off spending that you might need to budget on. And then the last category there is the legacy category. It's a combination of how much do you want left behind so that when you're gone, that goes to help your family, versus how much do you want to help your family while you're, or charities while you're still around. So, I've got plenty of clients who are helping out with the school expenses for grandkids, that kind of thing. Or maybe, upon retirement, they're able to gift 100 grand to son or daughter to help pay off their mortgage a little bit, that kind of thing. So work out how much is sort of day-to-day contributions, donations to charity that you want to do while you're still alive versus what sort of lump sums you want to leave behind. So my goal here today is to reassure those of you who think you don't have a lot of superannuation that all is not lost. You can survive, hopefully, on a modest or comfortable lifestyle, and or that if you get in early enough, hopefully there is still time for you to do a last minute, to implement some strategies over the next few years to really give your superannuation a boost before you do actually retire. So, in terms of what living expenses you need to live on, this graph here shows you, or this table shows you, it's got 2 rows. The first row is that income that you might need when you're at age 65 versus the bottom row that is when you're aged about 85. And that's because, as I said, based on that U-shaped graph that I showed you first, that this idea that you need more money while you're fit and active versus less money later on. It's a little bit less because you're not as active, but of course you need a little bit more support around the house. So this table then shows you modest lifestyles versus comfortable lifestyles, and it shows you single versus couple. So that these numbers get updated every quarter. I've got you the link to this ASFA retirement standard at the end, so you can keep an eye on that. And they also actually publish the actual breakdown of the living expenses behind these figures, so that you can compare, I don't know, how much you're spending on groceries or how much you're spending on house maintenance rates, etc., compared to the average person. Excuse me. So yeah, that gives you an idea there. So the question then becomes, well, if that's how much we're going to need as a pension to fund those living expenses going into retirement, well, what does that actually mean from a capital lump sum point of view? That, the balance in your superannuation fund, what's our target there? And the answer is that for that comfortable lifestyle, now this is also assuming that you retire at 67, not at 65 or 60, and it's also assuming that you have nothing left at the end, so the spend the kids' inheritance kind of model apart from the family home, and it's therefore also relying on the fact that, as you chew into your superannuation account over time, at some point in time you will then become eligible for the age pension, so that's going to help support you as well. So what they're saying here is that a couple actually only needs $640,000 in super, whereas a single person, obviously only one mouth to feed, so to speak, so you only need $545,000 in your super fund at retirement date. Now, so the good news is that if your superannuation is light on and you're happy to work until age 67 and you're happy to have nothing left apart from the hopefully family home at the end of it, and that's of course assuming you have a family home and you're not renting, then hopefully that amount of money is obtainable in your achievable in your super fund by that stage. Obviously, if you want to retire earlier, if you want to have something left over apart from the family home, then you're going to need a little bit more in your superannuation fund by that point in time. But, as the good news is, according to the statistics, a modest lifestyle of only 42 grand a year, you only need 70 grand, in a worst case scenario, you only need 70 grand in your super fund, because the age pension is going to supplement you with 38 grand, and then the 70 grand will earn you the extra 4 grand to bring you up to 42. So in a worst case scenario, you should be okay. So I hope that's sort of reassurance, but my point is I want to inspire you to do better than that. So just talking about Centrelink for just a second, and hopefully, touch wood, most of you aren't going to need to rely on that, but just as background, if you're a single person and eligible for the full pension, then it will provide you 25 grand a year, and as I just said, if you're a couple, it'll provide 38 grand a year. But for most people now, you can't access it until you're 67, because they did that phasing thing a few years ago. And of course, you do have to watch out that it's subject to an income and assets test. But there are also other benefits, the pensioner concession card or the Commonwealth healthcare card, that can be useful. So even if you're not eligible for the age pension, you should still see if you can apply for those Commonwealth healthcare cards, because that gets you the cheap prescriptions and discounts on your electricity bills, phone bills, that kind of rates, that kind of stuff. So yeah, do have a look at that in due course when the time's appropriate. But so having reassured you about what you can actually survive on, let's look at the inspiring side of things. So do you want a modest retirement? Do you want a comfortable retirement? or do you actually want to retire in style? Now, research looking at self-managed super fund members who are usually a little bit more active in their savings plans, shall we say, they are apparently looking for an average level of spending of 92 grand. So that's obviously what, about 50% more, nearly 50% more than what a comfortable lifestyle provides. And the median level of spending for them is closer to the 75 grand mark, which is again still bigger than that $64,000 mark. But the interesting part is that 30% of self-managed super fund members plan to have a pension that covers living expenses of over 100 grand a year, so they should be having fun. The question then becomes, well, how much money do we need to cover that? When we talk to our clients about what their target is for financial planning or retirement planning, where our goal is to try and therefore get clients to retire with $2 million between them. And on the basis that that will provide a 5% pension, resulting in the $100,000 a year for the couple. Now, the way this works is that we're targeting a rate of return of 7%, which I know at the moment is actually a bit challenging, but the 10-year average was sitting at 9% until this latest hoo-ha with the Ukraine and inflation rate and interest rates going up. But, so hopefully 7% over the long term, remembering we could be budgeting on 20, 30, 40 years here. So if we target a rate of return of 7% and we're doing the minimum 5% pension payments, that still leaves us therefore with 2% to be retained in the fund for capital growth. And then that effectively acts as a protection against inflation, because if your fund grows and you're still only taking 5%, well, then the 5% is a bigger amount, obviously. And then that covers you for the fact that prices have gone up in the meantime. And of course, the advantage of this strategy is that it leaves the original capital preserved for care services. In other words, if you need a bond to go into aged care facility, well, then, we can take a lump sum out of the super fund at that point in time. And of course, if there's any family legacy issues, money that you want to leave aside for family. So, if you can save as a couple somewhere between $640,000 and $2 million, you'll be doing really well in retirement with any luck. This table here, the way account-based pensions work, which I'll talk about in a second in a bit more detail, but the idea is that as you get older, the government forces you to take a minimum pension out of your super fund. So this is where I came up with, 5%, you retire, you take a 5% pension. If you've got $2 million in the fund, this bottom row, then that's where we get the $100,000 a year pension from. If you choose to take less out, that's fine. Your money will just last longer depending on your rate of return. But the way the tax office and the government has designed the superannuation system, they're expecting you, or requiring you, I should say, to deduct, to withdraw an ever-increasing amount out of your superannuation up to a minimum of 9% by the time you're aged 85 or 89. Now, of course, that doesn't mean you have to spend it. That just means it can't stay in superannuation. You'll just have to put it in a bank account or investments outside of superannuation. This table can sort of show you also that if you want to have say if you're 60 and you only want 20 grand a year to live on, you need 500 grand in your super fund, to preserve the capital. So just gives you, again, some more numbers to play with and work out where you sit versus where you want to sit. So now that we know what the target is, We just need to confirm, well, where are you now, so that we can then identify the gap, as we call it, and develop the strategies needed to fill that gap, whether it's extra contributions or cost savings or, other things that we can do, tax minimisation, tax strategies, that kind of thing, to fill in that gap. So let's have a closer look. In terms of where are you now, you do have lifestyle assets, hopefully your home and your car. Now, normally we don't take lifestyle assets into account because, your home, you're going to need to live in it. But of course, when we're doing our retirement planning, the question is, all right, you've got your home now, terrific. We're obviously going to make sure it's paid off with any luck. But, the question is this a home that's going to need upgrading? Does it require renovations because it's a bit tired, or to make it more elderly person friendly, that kind of thing? Or is it something you're actually going to be able to downsize out of to free up cash that can then be a lump sum into your superannuation fund? So that's why we need to know where you are now and what your sort of plans are going into retirement and beyond. Your car, again, how's that working for you at the moment? Is it going to need upgrading sooner or later, or is it now going to last you, until you're not driving anymore, kind of thing? So is that a cost? Is it one of those one-off post-retirement, I'm going to buy a new car and then that will last me? Or is it actually the car now is fine, it's going to last me another 5 years, but then I'm going to have to upsize and I need money set aside to do that with? Investment assets, your superannuation is obviously a big component of that with any luck, especially because it's so tax effective. But a lot of people also have rental properties and maybe share portfolios that aren't inside superannuation, but are therefore certainly available, as I said, maybe to fund your retirement prior to age 65, or prior to age 60, or at least help supplement your superannuation contributions. So we just have to get a handle on, what those are worth now and what income they're likely to generate going forward for you. When it comes to debt, there's a big difference between good debt and bad debt. The good debt is, I suppose that's a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek way of calling it, but it's more the what's tax deductible and what's not tax deductible, or good debts to buy investments. Bad debt is to buy toys and pay off credit cards and things like that. So, everybody's goal should be to get rid of their bad debt as soon as possible. And then if you've still got some good debt left that is funding investments, that's fine. But again, part of your retirement planning will be trying to work out whether you want that, whether you want to retire debt free, or, for example, if it's a rental property and it's still got a loan on it for another 10 years, it doesn't matter because rent's coming in sufficient to pay that kind of thing. So again, we just got to know where we stand and what the consequences are from a cash flow as well as tax point of view. The last note I've got there is insurances and estate planning. This needs to be reviewed for everybody, because life doesn't always go according to plan. If we do all this retirement planning on the basis that you're going to work for another 10 years and have therefore employer contributions going into your super and perhaps some after-tax money or salary sacrifice money going into super, but if you get hit by a bus, so to speak, tomorrow, and therefore you're not working anymore, well, that's going to limit, those extra 10 years worth of super contributions aren't going to happen. Not to mention the fact that your salary is not going to happen either, and you need something to help cover that gap with you not working anymore. So it's really important to review your wills and your insurances, A, to make sure that you're covered in case of accidents, and B, to make sure that you've got the right cover, the right terms, the most cost-effective premiums, and all that kind of stuff. There's been a tremendous shake-up in the insurance industry over the last 5 years. And if any of you have got policies that have just been rolling over every year, it really, really is time that you got those reviewed. And I'll talk in more detail towards the end on that as well. So we know where we are now. We know what our goals are going to be, or at least we have a slightly clearer idea. So step number 3 is to look at the strategies to get you there and fill in that gap so that you've got that more than comfortable retirement, so that you can relax and enjoy your retirement, not stress about watching every penny. So let's have a look at the things that we're going to cover. There are 6 main categories. Obviously, we want to maximise your super because it's just so tax effective. It's all tax free after 60. We want to look at options to minimise our tax. We want to make sure that our debt reduction strategy is in place. Is it possible to retire debt free? We want to look at asset protection. Now, that can be a variety of issues are involved in that. Personal insurance to make sure we've got cover if something goes wrong, and estate planning, which I forgot to mention, is both a combination of if you're still alive versus if you've passed away. But let's have a look at some of these in a bit more detail. When it comes to superannuation, most people are going to have an account-based super pension. We're also going to want to top up our superannuation. So I'm going to show you 10 ways to contribute extra money into your super fund. And of course, we want to protect your superannuation. So let's have a look at these in a bit more detail. When I talk about account-based pensions, that's different to a defined benefit pension. So the defined benefit pension is the old public service kind of pensions where you used to get a multiple of your highest average salary kind of thing, and it was guaranteed with inflation. So you never had to worry about it. The government promises to pay you your pension payment every fortnight. Account-based pensions, they cottoned on that those were no longer affordable because those defined benefit pensions, because they hadn't saved up for them. So they've progressively moved everybody across to these account-based superannuation pensions. And this is the kind where it's a bit like a bank account. Superannuation contributions go in, the money in there earns income. And of course, if you pull money out, well, then your balance drops. So, that's the effect of an account-based pension. But what it means is that the money can run out. So we just have to be really careful. How much income these account-based super pensions earn obviously depends on the performance of the underlying investments. You might have a cash-only superannuation account, or you might have a balanced fund, which has a combination of cash and shares. Maybe you've got a high-growth kind of fund, whatever helps you sleep at night. But obviously it's important to choose the right investments to make sure that you're getting the right rate of return that results in A, you being able to sleep at night, and B, it will generate the required income stream pension to fund those living expenses of yours. These account-based super pensions, as I mentioned before, you have that compulsory minimum pension amount that you must take every year when you're in pension phase, but there is no maximum. So you can take a lump sum. So you can take a higher pension. Instead of taking a 5% pension, you can take a 10% pension. That's fine. But there's no maximum. So you can take a lump sum capital amount out if you want to as well. The reason there's that compulsory minimum pension is, as I've mentioned before, is because the tax office wants you to progressively draw down on it, because it's tax-free after age 60, and the investment earnings inside the super fund in the meantime are all tax-free as well. So, like in up until the recent hiccups, if your super fund was earning 10% and you were only pulling out 5%, well, the 10% was earned by the super fund tax-free, and it paid you 5%, and that 5% was tax-free to you as well. So that's just gives you some background on how those superannuation accounts work. This slide here is talking about how much do you need to top up. The after-tax, again, this is based on the worst case scenario of retiring at 67, and it uses those stats before of a single person only needing 545 for a comfortable retirement. But what it's showing you is that the older you, and it's also assuming nil to start with. So hopefully most of you have already got something, but, you know, obviously a person who's only 20 wanting 40 grand a year only has to top up their superannuation by $1,100 a year because they've got enough SGC contributions going in. Whereas a 60-year-old person if they had absolutely nothing in super, would have to contribute 65 grand a year for the next 7 years to have enough capital in there to generate 40 grand a year. The point here is simply that superannuation is a slow and steady approach these days, especially with the contribution caps. So the younger you are, the more you can top up as you go, and again, like Michael said, you know, we want to be talking to you 5 or 10 years out from retirement to make sure that we do these top up payments before it's too late, and that, you know, they've got time for the compounding effect to work. The reason, you know, the young people don't need top up contributions on the higher salaries. That's salaries across the top. So, you know, on a higher salary, they're getting more SGC put in by their employer, so they don't need to top it up. But, you know, a 60-year-old still needs to top it up. So hopefully that's useful. In terms of the different ways you can boost your superannuation by putting extra money into it, you've obviously got your employer SGC contributions. Now they're up to 10.5% now, and they're going up by 0.5% per year until they get to 12%. That's already mandated in legislation now. So for those of you who are employers, please bear that in mind for your budgets, payroll budgets going forward. Employees, if their employer permits, can do salary sacrifice. And as of a few years ago, people can also do top-up contributions, personal contributions, direct into the super fund and claim a tax deduction for them. So we'll talk about what those limits are in a second. And a couple of years ago, they also introduced this idea of catch-up contribution. So again, if you haven't been able to put the maximum in every year, then there might be an opportunity for you to catch up, and whatever the unused contribution cap from previous years, if you didn't put the maximum in previous years, you can actually catch up and put that in this year on top of this year's contribution. But there are rules, so you've got to be careful. Once you've all of those first 4 are tax deductible kind of contributions, so they're called concessional. If you want to make an after tax, what's called non-concessional contribution, you can do that too out of your after tax pay. So, you know, you can also get your boss to take money out of your net pay and send that off to the super fund with their SGC and or any salary sacrifice contributions you want to do. So you can do it all through your payroll so that you don't even see it coming out of your pay. You can do that, but again, there are limits, so be careful. For the people who are very low income earners, like 35 to 50 grand, the government also does a co-contribution. So, you know, if you can scrape up $500,000, whatever it is, and put that, or 500, if you put that into your super fund, the government will top it up. They'll match it and put an extra 500 in for you. That might be perhaps relevant for some of your non-working spouses or people on maternity leave. So don't forget that one. Spouse contributions. You don't get a tax deduction for them, but you can get a rebate, a tax offset in your own personal return if you contribute $3,000 of after-tax money into your spouse's super fund. There's also a trick called spouse super splitting, and this is very useful where you want to even up superannuation accounts. So for one reason or another, maybe your spouse's superannuation account isn't as high as yours, or maybe it's an age thing where, you know, one of you's maybe there's a 10-year age gap, so the younger person can move some of their superannuation to the older person so that you can access it sooner, that kind of thing. There's the Downsizer contributions. If you sell your house and after age 60, then you can put some extra money into superannuation regardless of all the other limits. And for those of you running your own architecture practices, there's also the CGT contribution. So if you're able to sell your practice for a profit, you're able to put that money into super tax-free as well. But please note those yellow, bolded, highlighted comments at the bottom there. You have to be very careful to make sure you're eligible for those contributions. You have to watch out for contribution caps, as in the annual maximums that you're allowed to do. You have to watch out for age limits, because some contributions you can't do before or after a certain age. There's work tests, so some contributions you have to still be working, other ones you don't. And there's also total super balance caps, particularly for those catch-up contributions and the non-concessional ones. And the other thing to watch out for too is tax effectiveness. If you're only earning 25 grand a year, you're not paying any tax anyway. So don't bother putting tax deductible, concessional contributions into your fund, because you're not going to get any tax deduction for it. And in actual fact, the super fund's then going to pay 15% tax on them. So that's a waste of time. So bear that in mind as well, to, don't go chasing tax deductible money if you don't actually need the tax deduction. So that was awfully quick, and I'm sorry, but at least it's there in writing for you to refer to later. Just some of the fine print on the contributions. So these are the concessional ones. So all of those four, the employer, the salary sacrifice, the personal deductible, and the catch-up contributions. Apart from the catch-up contributions, it's the $27,500 per year. So be really careful to make sure you stay within that cap. And non-concessional contributions, this is the one that's interesting. Like if you win Tats Lotto, or more to the point, I don't know, get an inheritance or sell a rental property or some investments, and you end up with a lump sum, you can actually put in 110 grand each per person into your superannuation funds. You don't get a deduction, but at least it's in the super fund where it's taxed concessionally, and eventually when you take it out, it'll be tax-free as well. And sometimes you can actually bring forward and do 3 years worth of contributions at once. So 330,000 for you, 330,000 for your spouse. There's an ability to put a lump sum of $600,000 into your super fund. But as I said before, be really careful, please, to make sure you're eligible, because the penalties for putting too much money into your super fund are nasty. How to protect and grow your superannuation. This is where we want you to review your superannuation fund instead of just, filing the annual statement every year when it turns up. Do have a closer look at these issues. More specifically, the overall performance, because we're talking about, over 10 years, just a little bit better performance has a big difference on the resulting balance of your super fund. So do keep an eye on your fund. Make sure it's one of those top quartile funds that is being run properly and performing. And do note though that changing, don't go chasing the top performing fund every year, because changing super funds every year costs money in terms of fees, and also crystallizing capital gains that you don't otherwise need to. So don't overdo it, but certainly keep an eye on it. You need to invest wisely in terms of what your superannuation fund is invested in. The classic example is when I find somebody who's got all of their money in a cash conservative account inside superannuation. They think that they've minimized their risk because their money's guaranteed. They can't lose anything with the share markets going up and down. But what they're forgetting is, for example, this middle one, inflation risk. If you retire with $500,000 in your super fund and you only spend what you earn, in 10 years' time, you're still only going to have $500,000 in your super fund, and it's obviously not going to buy as much. And that's actually just as bad as losing money on the stock market. So you have to get the balance right between investments that will grow and therefore keep up with inflation, as well as some conservative assets that, you know, give you that peace of mind that you've got money to live on. And that bottom one there, you know, making sure you do understand what you're invested in so that you can sleep at night. So do bear that in mind. Similar to performance, we want you to review your current super fund's fees, just simply because the compounding effect of excessive costs on the net performance of your fund can be quite significant. So a lot of the older superannuation funds, for example, they don't have the newer, more competitive fee structures. So again, this is why, you know, at least every 5 years, you know, have a good look at your super fund and how it compares. There's plenty of websites out there that you can compare your current super fund performance, gross fees net, compared to other superannuation funds. And also like to make a note there that self-managed super funds have their place. They can be very cost effective. They can also be very useful for certain strategies, especially if you need a lot of flexibility and especially in the pre-retirement phase. But perhaps as you get older and everything's settled down and now you're just drawing a pension, maybe a self-managed super fund isn't actually as cost effective as it used to be, and or you know, that you're not getting the benefits or the flexibility out of it because you don't need it anymore. So yeah, there's a right time for self-managed super funds, and there's also a time that perhaps you need to review that as well. And as I've said here, review insurances. A lot of people have super inside their funds. They have insurance inside their super funds. Maybe A, it needs reviewing, and B, maybe move your insurance outside of super so that it's not chewing up your contributions. Now, I'm talking fast and still running out of time. There are a whole stack of tax minimization strategies that can be used to minimize your tax. That gives you more money left over. So, but, you know, the big thing is superannuation is so tax effective that, you know, you do need to consider that as your primary method of saving for retirement. Debt reduction, again, that conversation about good debt versus bad debt. Do try and get your house paid off in retirement. It keeps life simple. You don't have to worry about interest rates going up, and you don't have to worry about mortgage repayments chewing into your pension payment, and or it frees you up to invest outside of invest in other things. Asset protection, again, talk to a financial planner or your accountant. You know, there's different ways of owning assets, whether it's in superannuation or family trusts or investment companies. And of course, insurance is used to protect your assets. I've already talked enough about insurance policies, but, you know, the goal could also be to get to a position down the bottom there where you're self-insured as soon as possible to avoid those premiums. Insurance premiums skyrocket dramatically when you hit sort of 50. So you want to get into a position where your net asset position or your superannuation is enough that in a worst case scenario, you can survive, you know, without spending a fortune on insurance premiums. And then that, of course, gives you more money to invest. So estate planning. You know, things don't go according to plan. We've got two components. The first one is your enduring powers of attorney. Accidents do happen. In case you lose mental capacity temporarily or permanently, it makes sure that the right people make the right decisions about the right things for you and your family. And you can have different powers of attorney, as in a different person to look after the look after your finances, and a different person looking after your medical or personal lifestyle choices. So, you know, in a worst case scenario, it means that, you know, you have somebody you trust choose which retirement home you're going to live in, and the care that you're going to get, versus somebody else who's then in charge of paying for it. So just keeps that job separate, or it can be the same person. And then, of course, in a worst case scenario, having a will in place is really important. I know there are a lot of cultural issues around estate planning, and there's even some people out there who think that they don't have enough to justify preparing a will. But honestly, the hassle that it causes your family in such a time of grief, it's just mean to not go and get a will prepared. You can do a news agency will for all I care, but otherwise they've got to muck around getting the court to appoint somebody. If it's the public trustee, they charge a fortune. So whatever little assets you do have, they take a fortune. Or if you do have a lot of assets, they're going to get an even bigger fortune. So please get your will prepared. They're very flexibly written these days. So, you know, even if you're only 40, a properly prepared will can last you 20 years, because it is so flexible. The way they're written. And of course, review your reversionary pension and binding death benefit nominations on your super policy, and review those beneficiaries of your insurance policy. You know, what do you want to go to your spouse? What do you want to go to your kids? You know, what's joint assets just automatically go to the other person. They don't even go in your will, all that kind of stuff. And especially if you've got a blended family, you know, say with the kids from a first marriage or that kind of stuff, you've got to get professional help to make sure that the right money goes to the right people. We're looking for the right executors to manage your estate, to get the right assets to the right beneficiaries at the right time. So, you know, your kids, you might want to tie the money up until they're 21 or 25, that kind of thing. So please do get your estate planning sorted as part of your retirement planning. So in summary, we are living longer than ever before. We've got that potentially 30 to 40 years in retirement. According to the stats, the majority of Australians don't have enough retirement savings for a comfortable lifestyle yet, but with a bit of hard work and some really good strategies, you can do that boost now, so that by the time you do hit retirement age, you've really picked up the balance, and then you'll be okay. And because of this new, well, relatively new, the last 10, 20 years, this idea of these annual super contribution limits, you really do need this slow and steady approach to building your superannuation. Do not rely on, you know, last minute contributions, because the caps will just stop you getting the money into super. And as I said, it's tax free after 60. So that's the most tax effective way you can save for your retirement. So as I said, never too early. Do seek advice from the financial planner. I've said there, it's worth it. We do talk to people from time to time, and when we say to them, look, it's going to cost you $5,000, $6,000, whatever it is, to get a statement of advice prepared, they balk and sort of go, oh, that's not worth it. And it's like, but hang on a minute, if I save you even just $2,000 a year for the next 10 years, that's $10,000 that I've saved you for the cost of $5,000. Now, in reality, by the time a financial planner comes up with some tax minimization strategies, gets you in a better superannuation fund, reviews your insurances to make sure that you're not overpaying on your premiums, and reviews your super fund to make sure that that's working hard for you, they're not going to be saving you $2,000 a year. They're going to be saving you $10,000 a year, and the rest. So the benefit really does outweigh the cost. And if nothing else, it gives you peace of mind that you are on track and you know what you need to do for the next 10 years, so that you can make good decisions about what you're spending your money on in the meantime. But either way, even when you do go and see a financial planner, make sure you are comfortable and understand the strategy that they're developing for you and the investments that they're recommending for you. I don't want you to be on Current Affair or whatever the TV show is, so find somebody reputable, and make sure that you really are comfortable and understand what they're doing. Our job as a financial advisor is to do pretty much what I've shown you here. We want to understand your current circumstances, your current obligations, future goals, aspirations, and prepare that plan for you going forward to keep you on track, and so that you can make informed decisions about your money as you go over the next few years, and so that you can reach those retirement goals and live the life that you want to without stressing about every penny. So in terms of where to from here, that first website link there, for those of you who are interested in what the average living expenses are that all these stats are based on, you can go to that website and you can see what they've prepared there. There's plenty of other things that you can Google. Sorry about my typo. That's me on the second line there. So I'm from DFK Everalls and Everalls Wealth Management here in Canberra. I believe the AIA sent this out to the Australia-wide membership. So, we're all post-COVID, we're all good at Zooming and that kind of thing. So happy to chat to you that way. But otherwise, if you'd like to talk to somebody a fraction more local, you can go to the DFK ANZ website. There are 13 or 14 firms around Australia now, DFK firms around Australia and New Zealand. So there's a few in Melbourne and Sydney. We've got Adelaide, Brisbane, Cairns, 2 in Perth, and a couple of regional ones as well. So there's definitely somebody closer to you, for those of you who aren't Canberra based, if you would like some expert advice about your retirement plans. I've thrown in, one last thought here. What will I do when I retire? My goal is to enable you to have choices. And also a bit tongue-in-cheek, do architects ever really retire completely? I'm always seeing that there's another project for them to do, or so there's always something in the wings. But otherwise, also probably not so relevant to you guys, but it is important to know that everybody needs someone or something to love, something to do day to day. So whether that's volunteering in retirement, whether you've got grandkids to look after, whether you've got a hobby that you're now looking forward to spend time on, you do need something to keep you out of mischief all day in retirement. And of course, we all need something to look forward to. So whether that's an annual holiday, or simply visiting family or something like that, make sure that in retirement you've got something to look forward to. So there you go, just my not so focused on the numbers, but personal well-being. So there you go. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much, Melissa. Fantastic presentation. Very simple, very straightforward. Probably one of the most straightforward presentations I've seen on retirement planning. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate the work that you've put into presenting this to us, all of our members across Australia. And like you said, we've got people from WA right through to New South Wales and NT and right down into Tassie. So it's great to see such a good crowd from across the country. A couple of questions have come into me. And this is the first one I'm going to actually ask. And across our profession here in architecture, we do have a gender equity issue in the makeup of our population. Reading, interestingly enough, Australian Super recently released a report back in June of this year stating that women have, on average, 42% less in their superannuation accounts than men. Obviously, another clear case of gender inequality identified there as well. Yep. In cases where, say, marriage breakdowns take place later in life, how does the government view or support women who often face looming retirement with a very minimal superannuation balance?
You're right. It's a very challenging issue. I'm not aware of anything specific other than what you get via Centrelink. So, that means that if you've lost your assets or your retirement support through divorce or something else, then you're pretty much reliant on seeing Centrelink for age pension support, and sometimes public housing, that kind of thing. So yes, it's a very challenging position to be in.
Okay, thank you.
There are a variety of other strategies, but they obviously get a fraction more personal depending on the people. But yeah.
Of course, yeah. Let's take a couple, and an example couple. This is a private message that's come through to me. Let's call them Tom and Jane. They've planned their retirement. They plan to take them to about 90. However, they keep going. They join that very lucky 5% of the population who make it to 3 digits, and they make it to 100. However, their money's run out. Is it as simple as then just reverting onto the age pension for Tom and Jane? It is.
Okay. So, yeah, if you've managed to use up all of your superannuation account, then you do end up just on the age pension. So you resort back to that very modest lifestyle. If you own your own home, there is an option for what's called reverse mortgages. So rather than selling your home and downsizing, you can keep your home, and the bank basically lends you money that you then use that money to live on. And instead of paying the bank back, when you eventually pass away, the house is, or you eventually sell the house, then the loan is paid back at that point in time. So that's also another last resort thing. If you desperately want to stay in your own home, but you can't afford your lifestyle, and perhaps you don't have kids, or your kids are doing okay and therefore don't need an inheritance, then maybe you can chew into your own home as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Now, look, all of your presentations were sort of predicated on the fact that one might own their own home. What about lifelong renters? I mean, we've got a generation now of younger people who may well indeed become lifelong renters. What happens to their sort of financial situation, given the fact that they might not have any substantial assets behind them?
Exactly. The statistics I gave you in terms of the living expenses expected for a modest lifestyle or comfortable lifestyle includes $105 to $130 a week for home expenses. Now, so what that means is for your people who own their own home, they've obviously got to pay rates and repairs and maintenance and things like that anyway. So that's what that $100 to $130 is covering. For people who are renting, I'm afraid, obviously, you are going to need a lot more retirement savings, because a significant chunk of your superannuation pension is going to be chewed up in rent payments. And therefore, I've talked about minimums and goals and all the rest of it, but yeah, it is predicated on the fact that you've already got your own home, and if you don't, you are going to have to fund that somehow, and that is definitely a challenge, because otherwise you're going to end up, I guess, on the public housing system if you don't have enough to live on. So I think public housing is income tested. So yeah, it's not a good scenario. So people who have chosen, who are either in a position where they can't buy their own home, maybe they need to see a financial advisor about what can they tweak such that they can afford to buy their own home, or maybe they have to be a bit more open as to what kind of home they buy. We all know 40 years ago, the average house was a 3-bedroom house, and you were lucky if it had an ensuite, let alone a family room kind of thing. Now all of a sudden houses are 5 bedrooms and rumpus rooms and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's everybody has their own circumstances, but if you're going to be in a pickle, maybe getting some financial advice might help you to resolve that one way or another, whether it's save up more for your superannuation so that you can afford the rent, or whether it's actually change your circumstances now so that you can afford to buy a place.
Let's say, for example, you do have a 5-bedroom home, and but however, somehow you have very minimal balances in your superannuation. You haven't really sort of prepared much for your future, but you may be asset rich in some form. Does the government have the power to command you to sell assets to fund your future post-work?
No, they can't. But the age pension from Centrelink. So if you spend all your money and your assets aren't generating income for you to live on, the age pension income test deems income. It's not based on your actual income. They base it on deemed income. So you can have a whole stack of properties that aren't rented out, that's your prerogative, but the government's not going to give you an age pension just because you choose not to rent them out and therefore earn income that way. So you do have to watch that income test and or assets test.
Great. And our final question, it's in relation to disposal of assets. Some people, and this is a question I've received privately, in terms of disposal of assets into your children's names, effectively wiping out your own asset portfolio, but of course putting it into Junior's name. Are there loopholes that people can take advantage of in some way, shape or form?
I wouldn't say it's a loophole, but the rules are, well, basically, so step number one is you can do whatever you like. So you can give all your money away, not a problem at all. Let's just hope that the kids give you some back to live on. But if you're divesting yourself of assets so that you're eligible for the age pension, Centrelink's wise to that, and they have what's called a gifting rule. And you're only allowed to gift $10,000 a year for 3 years in a 5-year period. So a maximum of $30,000 in 5 years. You can gift as much as you like. You can gift $1 million, but they're still going to treat that $1 million for that 5 years as an asset. Okay. And therefore you might not be eligible for the age pension. So you can always do whatever you like with your money, but at the end of the day, you've got to look after yourself, because chances are you won't be eligible for the age pension if you're doing something funny like that.
Right.
But once your 5 years is up, and this is again where pre-retirement planning comes into it, you know, if you're 5 years out from retirement and you divest yourself of all of your assets by, you know, so that you then become eligible for the age pension, cool. But really, for 38 grand a year for and you want to trust your kids, they're going to give you the money back.
True. Thank you, Melissa. That's been fantastic. And thanks so much for your presentation. It was just really, incredibly comprehensive yet simple. And so thanks so much to you for doing that.
Yeah, I try too hard and give you too much information and talk too fast, but it's all there in black and white.
No, we love it. It's great. No, we always like your presentations because they always contain so much detail and they're just really fascinating. So thank you so much. We really do appreciate it.
A lot of food for thought. Do your homework carefully and feel free to buzz us if you want to talk in more detail.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Melissa. I'm definitely off to get a will. It's something that I haven't done and it has been weighing on my mind. So
we can help. We can help with wills as well. So
I'll be in touch. Sounds wonderful.
And finance broking and all of that. If you want your mortgages reviewed now that interest rates are going up, keep the banks honest. So yeah.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you to you, of course, Melissa Healy from DFK Everalls in Canberra. Great to have you with us yet again. And thank you to all of our members as well for joining us on this evening's presentation about retirement planning. I hope there's been something in there that has been helpful. So until next time, do stay safe. I've been Michael Linke here at the Institute of Architects. Thanks so much to you all for joining me. Have a wonderful evening. Take care, and I'll see you very soon. Thank you.
Thank you.